I'll give you a little bit of background. I got a call from the transition team that started right before the president took office. And that transition team worked together. They were people from all over the country. Some of them had worked in the Clinton administration. Others had been on the campaign. Others were, everyone was a thought leader in some way: commerce, labor, education, a whole broad range of people, treasury. And I got a call and they asked me to come and talk to Arne Duncan about higher education, and specifically about the forgotten sector of community colleges. So I said sure. I went to Washington, spent the day with Arne Duncan, and 4 days later he offered me a job and asked me to come to work on this team. After that, in April, President Obama made a speech, and in that speech he said one phrase that has guided everything that I want to do: coming to Washington, selling a house in California, really doing a whole 180-degree turn in my life. So I guess lesson learned, and I've been doing a lot of commencement speeches: be ready for anything in your life. You may not end up doing exactly what you thought today, but there are opportunities that you can take advantage of if you're willing to take some risks. And it was a big risk for me. I loved my job. I was really looking forward to helping solve the budget crisis in California, and I had a whole long list of things to do. I was in charge of 45,000 students who needed higher education and so on. Anyway, President Obama gave this speech in April, and in the month of April and May, I was in a very detailed vetting process of disclosure, where you disclose your financials, everything you did since you were 18 years old. You didn't want to know me when I was a teenager. I was a pretty tough teenager, and going through all of that. And President Obama said that by 2020, he wanted the United States to be the best educated, most competitive workforce in the world. And what that translated into was that we needed to significantly increase the number of students coming to college from high school, the preparation that students would have being ready to enter the workforce with the growing jobs in certain fields: healthcare, IT, nanotechnology, all the kinds of things you're reading about. And it was really an inspiring vision when then in July, after I got appointed and started work July 1, made it through the FBI and everyone else, came to Washington and was fortunate to travel with the president's entourage to Warren, Michigan, where he talked to people that had been laid off from the job market, who were automotive workers in a plant in Warren, Michigan, saying that we would do everything we could to help America get back to work, and that one of the important sectors to do that was going to be the community colleges, because they provided workforce training as well as a gateway into the rest of higher education. To which I then sort of stepped back and said, given the values that our president is expressing, given the goal of being the best educated, most competitive workforce in the world, what do we have to do on the 7th floor in the Department of Education to work toward that goal? And how can we work with high schools, which all of you are a part? I think all of you may know that 27% of high school students aren't completing high school. We're losing a high school student every 22 seconds. It's a tragedy. In some cities like Detroit, we're losing more than 50% of students. And they're not leaving because of senioritis. They're leaving in 9th and 10th grades. So we have a tremendous, tremendous challenge, not only to bridge higher education and high school and middle school and elementary school, but once we get more students completing high school, helping them enter and complete college, because at the college level, and this ties back to our agenda, we're losing 50% of college students over 6 years in college. So the best thing you all can do is graduate from high school, enter college and the workforce. 2/3 of American undergraduates work while they go to college. We haven't understood that well as a society, that people need to work and live at the same time, and we should help students be working in more relevant career jobs, so that if you want to be a nurse, you could actually get a job in a hospital part-time while you're getting your studies done in college. So we've got to do some simple things like that so that we can retain and graduate 50% more students over the next decade from college. So it's all tied together. The president and Arnie Duncan, my boss, have what we call a cradle to career agenda. So we have 25% of kids from economically disadvantaged communities not ready for kindergarten. We have students leaving, as I said, across the board in the K-12, and then we have our challenges in higher education. So this is exactly what everyone on our team is doing. Let me stop there.
Okay. So last year, some of us went to South Africa to interview the Archbishop Desmond Tutu. And one of the main things we talked about was the principle of Ubuntu, which in essence means a person is a person through other people. And in your speech at the EDGE conference in New Delhi, you quoted President Obama and you said, "We are living in an increasingly interdependent world where exposure to an international education will contribute to achieving a more stable, modern global society." So I was wondering if the concept of interdependence, or Ubuntu, was a major part of your development of education.
Yes, I mean, in higher education, we, for the first time, have welcomed a new Deputy Assistant Secretary for International Education. We've never had that in the Department of Education before. That person, Andre Lewis, who you'll maybe get to meet at another time or another class that would come, is looking across the board to see how can we build on what the president said in his Cairo speech and expand international exchanges so that we will have more students and professors going to other countries, but vice versa, coming here. So I took a delegation of 13 college presidents to India in March. And as you said, and one of the things that was really apparent was that India is sending us 100,000 students to the United States. We're only sending 3,000 students a year. So the conversation was, what can we do to encourage more American students and American institutions to really partner more effectively with Indian institutions and understand, for example, the kinds of common goals that we face. So for example, we have many hundreds of thousands of undereducated people in this country. People don't really think about this. But as almost our 300 million people in the country, 93 million adults are at basic or below basic levels of literacy. So when I went to Warren, Michigan, as I said, and I talked to auto workers who were losing their jobs on the assembly line, they weren't ready to ladder into something else. They needed the literacy skills that you're learning in high school and that you learned in middle school and elementary school. So I really, stepping back in terms of the values of our interconnectedness, that is something we share with India. They have millions of people in the same boat. So what can we do together to create, for example, a common literacy agenda so that countries who have these kinds of problems, America really wasn't as open as I think we need to be about our challenges and what we're doing to address them. What are the innovative kinds of things we're doing in, for example, open education, so that we can actually adapt our literacy programs to be available to people not only in this country, but people in other countries, and vice versa. How can we learn from their literacy programs to adopt the best of what they're doing? So we talked to many students at the Indian universities. They have a very top tier set of universities, and then sort of a lot of schools that you wouldn't be able to really judge the quality of those schools. They have tremendous challenges with quality control. And we have some of those same challenges here. So there's a lot we can do to share, and we are interconnected. My hope is that every college student and every high school student would have an international experience before graduation, before high school graduation, before college graduation. How do you do that? Well, we've got to depend on the creativity of the people in our schools and really ask them. The federal government can propose and support great ideas, but the action is on the ground. So let me stop there.
Hi, I'm Lily. You also quoted Obama in your speech at the 2010 AIEA conference, saying, "Being educated is about being a good citizen, being able to think critically, evaluate the world, and process all of the information, knowledge, and technology that engulfs us." Do you think our education system is producing the kind of citizens the world needs now?
Not yet. It's not that it can't, but I think we have a lot more to do. I don't think, as I said, we have enough students graduating, and I don't think our standards have been high enough. So I'm very encouraged that Many people from across the country who work in literacy and math and other subjects are looking at what kinds of standards do we want for U.S. students to have when they graduate from high school. If you compare our mathematics curriculum to what is being taught in China, Chinese students come out of their high school math curriculum with a much deeper grounding in statistics and computer science and the kinds of mathematics that will lead right into calculus. And the difference is, if you do some comparisons, that they have a problem-based curriculum. We have depended in America a lot on drill and practice. And you need drill and practice, but if you're not solving world problems and you don't understand how algebra can be used and why it's necessary and how it gets applied in the classroom, you don't think it's relevant, so you don't learn it. So we have math, for example, as a barrier to moving on into higher education, because when you graduate, you have to take calculus or statistics in college. So you just have to be ready for that. And I think, again, it ties back to the other questions about comparisons in other countries and why we're 10th in the world now when we want to be first in the world, as the president has said.
Hi, I'm PK.
Hi, PK.
I was just wondering what you think constitutes a fully educated person in America.
I think a fully educated person will be able to think critically about the most pressing problems locally, statewide, nationally, and globally. And that's really hard because most people think about today, what's happening right around me, not what I'm doing that can change how we are in the rest of the world. So I think a highly educated person will have a sense of ethics. I was very disheartened to see that a couple of universities were eliminating their philosophy departments because the scholars in philosophy help our country think about logic and ethical decision making and the kinds of things that can inform how we want to have a curriculum for college and high school. So ethical behavior, critical thinking, civic engagement. I feel really strongly that people need to participate in the life of their community and in society. And I think of society globally as well as locally. So I think it's tremendously important to have people educated that will participate in American society and promote the values of a democracy, which means that there should be an expectation that everybody on this planet, on this country, votes. You know, this is the heart of America. We don't have the best people going into government. We need people who really want to go into government. Look at California. It's a disaster. We've got to really get the best people that really want to contribute civically. So civic engagement is very important. And as we discussed before, global competency. So there are actually 10 great outcomes that the American Association of Colleges and Universities has studied for the last 5 years with every college and university in the country. I think over maybe it's not every, it's maybe a third of the colleges and universities in the country, and they've got 10 outcomes that they want to see students from high school and college contributing. So you can take a look at that. I think you have to have the skills. You know, you have to be able to compute, you have to be able to read, you have to be able to write. If you ask how many college graduates can really write beautifully, not a lot of people. We've lost a couple of generations. So, you know, how do you do that? You write from your heart, keep writing, because writing will allow you to express all those values in ways that we desperately need as a society.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, I'm Haley.
Hi, Hugh.
In our Values and World Thought class, our textbook is based off of Bill Moyer's World of Ideas. And in one of his interviews with Professor Michael Sandel, Sandel asked, does the government have any responsibility in attending to the character of its citizens? So do you feel that our educational institutions should be concerned with the subjects of ethics and character?
Absolutely. And I think, you know, the subjects of ethics and character are expressed in the faculty and the teachers that people are exposed to as they're going through the K-12 system and in higher education. So if the faculty embody ethical values, they will express them in whatever discipline they're teaching, whether it's U.S. history or, you know, English or mathematics or, you know, biology. any of those. For example, a biologist will look at the ecology of the world and say, what responsibility do we have to climate? And what is our ethical stance related to climate? And what should we be doing? Or, they're going to ask you, to compare and contrast to say, are we creating the kind of global climate that this country, that's going to allow, our world to exist or not? So I think, should it be taught specifically as a course? Some institutions do. They teach ethics, and that is part of the curriculum. Character building, it's embedded in the curriculum. I think the federal government can provide leadership to show the best practices and models about where that's occurring, but I don't think one size fits all. I would never, as an undersecretary, say every school in this country will teach ethics in this way. I will say that we have values of our democracy that include, helping everyone who graduates be, an ethical person in this world and contribute to society. And you may do it in every kind of, in a special class, but you may also do it in the teachers and the teacher training that you actually do in your hiring processes, so you have teachers that can express that and can really challenge students to become models for ethical behavior.
Hi, I'm Brittany. What do you think are the best indicators of future success?
For an individual or for society?
For both.
Okay. Well, for individuals, I think, are you living a good life? And that has to be defined by every individual. Are you contributing to society in a meaningful way? Are you able to sustain your family, even if you're just a family of one? Can you earn a living? And are you following a passion in earning a living, or are you just working in a job because it's the only job you can get because you weren't trained to do multiple kinds of things and have the flexibility to, as you're going to have to do, change jobs 5 to 10 times in your lifetime? You're going to have enormous flexibility, which is why that critical thinking, I think, that you asked about is so important. So I think, to live a holistic life, to live a right life, to care for other people. Many of us at my age now, we're caring for parents as well as kids. I think, we have to think about that responsibility to have a family and what it means. And then for society, is society providing opportunities for people? Is education available? Is it a civil right? Arnie Duncan calls education, the most pressing civil rights issue of our time, and you could probably talk about that in class, whether you think it's a civil right or not. Should college be a right of every individual? We have an open door system at the community college. We've said anyone can come if they can benefit from a college education. What do we do with, the 50% of students dropping out of an inner city situation where they don't have the literacy skills? Who's going to update them? They didn't get it in high school. Where is that going to take place? There's a cost to society. So we want societies to really, increase the literacy levels, the critical thinking, the basic skills of its people. We have too many societies where it's very easy to be brainwashed. And you look at whole societies where it's very frightening, where more than half of the country are people under 18 and they're not educated. So I think education is critically important for the future of the society, and I think having a job is critically important. And I don't think we do nearly enough in helping match education and jobs for students in the country, much less other countries, so that people can ladder up and figure out, if I want to start in home health and I want to aspire to be a nurse or a doctor, what's the ladder that I go for? Or technology, if I start here, I want to be a network administrator, or I want to be a Cisco systems executive, what's my ladder? How do I go there? And many students don't have those ladders, so I think that's a responsibility of countries to figure out, what are the career pathways for students? How can we bridge education and economics in a fundamental way? And then, as I said, a society that cares for its people and contributes so that even the poorest people have a chance to enter occupations and livelihoods So I was thrilled when the president passed the Education Reconciliation Act as part of the healthcare reconciliation, because he's guaranteeing that federal student aid will be available for the next decade for anyone, and I call it the top 100% of students in the country. Regardless of income, you'd be able to go to college. And that's very exciting. So let me stop there.
Hi, I'm Annika.
Hi,
And I
Annika.
was just wondering, with all the emphasis on standardized testing, if you think there's a loss of creativity and self-reflection and discrimination in the education process.
Tests are taking too much time. We're not using the modern advances in cognitive science. You could cut down a huge amount of time if we had more sophisticated tests. The good news is that our secretary, Arnie Duncan, has just issued $350 million to actually modernize assessments so that the instruments, the testing instruments that you take, if you take it on the computer or on your watch or however you're going to take these tests in the future, will branch to what you know and what you're able to do. It should cut down on the testing time. There's way too much testing. Teachers will tell you that. There's real value in looking at student work and comparing how students are thinking about different topics, different subject matter that they're engaged in. And the teachers are frustrated, and you'll see that across the country. Way too much testing and way too little that we're learning from it all. So we're hoping that we can be more sophisticated, use our time better, use your time better as students, and certainly give our faculty, our teachers, more ability to innovate and be creative.
My name is Noah, and it must be hard to implement change in such a huge, complicated system like our education system. And how do you go about changing like a large system like that? And do you ever worry about failing, like going the wrong way when you do that?
Yeah, we worry about everything. I can do a little thing. I think there are 5 levers of change. Okay, one lever at the federal level is laws. You can make laws like we did to make federal student aid available for the next 10 years in the Reconciliation Act, and you can get a result. And that law was exciting because we actually saved the country $68 billion that was reverted to give students who needed federal aid to go to college a check from the Treasury instead of from the banking system. And what that did was save $68 billion over 10 years to pay for the federal student aid because we were subsidizing banks. So that's a way that you can use laws to change things for people. It's very hard. We don't have millions of dollars for lobbyists or anything like that. So it's very important that we do things that will be an investment in the talent that is in this country, as you saw in that example. Another lever of change is regulations. We can actually look at all the laws, and if we don't have ways to implement them in terms of a regulatory environment, we can change behavior through regulation. So we have a lot of controversy right now in a topic called gainful employment, where one of the sectors of higher education has to prepare students for gainful employment if you are a student in a for-profit institution in this country. Huge controversy about what should our federal definition of gainful employment be. Another one, what should the incentives for recruiting students be? We want to make sure that we don't take advantage of students in this country, and that if students take on loans or debt, they'll be able to pay it back instead of going bankrupt, which means that the country would have to pay for them anyway a second time. So regulation is a second one. The third is the bully pulpit. And you'll see Arnie Duncan, as he says, education is the most pressing civil rights issue of our time, using the bully pulpit, using the voice of the federal government as a way to influence behavior. A fourth is transparency, making explicit what is going into a different problem, how transparent it is, who's participating. You'll see, all kinds of displays. You may agree, you may not agree, but we believe, the president has said, that transparency, open government should be a pinnacle. Who's paying for what behind the scenes? We have way too much money changing hands in this country, and you don't know what the full picture is. And what you want to do, and look at all the debate about health care. Should we have provided health care to everyone in this country at a fundamental level? So that's a fifth one. And then the last one I'd say is accountability. Actually displaying how people are performing, how students are doing in school, how teachers are teaching. A lot of controversy about tying student performance to teacher evaluation. Should that be part of what you ask when you're evaluating a teacher? There's a lot of controversy about that, but it's about accountability. So I hope that's an answer to your question.
I was told if I had time I could ask this question. I don't want you to feel obligated to answer. But what do you make of the fact that so many well-educated and privileged people help bring about a recession by acting in unethical ways?
Well, I don't have a tolerance for unethical behavior. I think, when you look at the Wall Street conundrum, it's very disappointing that we haven't, and I think you'll see business schools actually putting in place, courses in ethics. And they've chosen to do that because we haven't done a very good job. We wouldn't have had this kind of a crisis in this kind of a way if, we may still have had an economic crisis. If you look back, I was just saying, this is my sixth budget crisis in my career. And if you look back at every decade and you look at the history, you usually have a huge economic crisis, and that takes 3 to 5 years to kind of meet out, and then usually have 3 to 5 years of growth and innovation and immense productivity. So if you look at economic indicators, you'll see a scale that goes like this every decade. And I don't think, as I said about scaling, I don't think we learn the lessons that we should be learning very easily. And I think part of it is that we're changing out people. For example, in November, we've got 37 races that are going to be decided in November. That's 3/5 of the country. The leadership is going to change out. And when you change out leadership every 4 to 8 years, and I know this as a college president, I was there for 16 years, it takes time to make change that's sustainable. And so I think, getting back to your question, we have, I think, failed the American people in some ways because we haven't really stood out or called out those behaviors that we expect at all levels of government, education, the economy, in every single sector. And I think we have to be more explicit, and I think it comes down to what are the voters telling us, and how can we have more of you really pushing and voting and leading for us in this country. And we've abrogated some of our responsibilities, unfortunately, which is why it's so important to get people back to the center and say, this is what the democracy really means to us, and this is our expectation for every American. And yeah, one size doesn't fit all, but there are some fundamentals about being a part of this country that we expect of everyone.
So I know we're getting close to our time, and I know that we have to be respectful that you have a few other things to do today, probably. But what I'd like to do, if there's a minute, is just to hear, what did you guys hear that struck you or mattered to you?
Go ahead.
I found it very interesting when you were talking about how education should be a civil right for all people, because often, like in the broad scheme of things, you don't exactly think of it as a civil right, not like equality or something like that. And to put it in that perspective makes this issue seem even more urgent and catastrophic almost.
When you said that there's value in evaluating how students think, I thought that was really important because we put so much emphasis on the product and not so much on the journey getting there.
Yeah.
I really liked what you said about how application is much more important than just learning drills, because we need to learn how to apply what we're learning instead of just learning it.
I liked what you said about it depends on the school's creativity in order for kids to get a really good, well-rounded education, and I think there needs to be more of that.
All in? Okay, so who's got the closer?
Hi, I'm Danny.
Hi.
So, given your extraordinary career, do you think you could give us advice for those of us who are just starting out?
Sure. Follow your passion. Do not let go of your passion. And, passion is hard to figure out what the heck it is because there are so many unknowns, but listen to yourself. I don't think we do enough listening to ourselves. So, and what I mean by that is, you are in the middle of this world and you are getting bombarded by everything. You're getting bombarded by school, you're getting bombarded by your family, you're getting bombarded by society, getting bombarded by media. And you have skills, you have abilities, you have things you want to do, you have natural inclinations, you have talent. But sometimes in all of this, you get into information overload and you don't have any quiet time. You're beeping all the time. Your cell phones are going off. People are talking to you. I see, three young girls walking down the street, texting each other instead of talking to each other, and I worry about that. So I think I can at least appreciate the kind of environment you're in. And when I say follow your passion, I really try to mean, help you take the time you need to see what you want to get out of life. And the kinds of things, if you love music, I hate it when people say, I love music, but I'm never going to be an artist because it's just impossible. If you really love music, you'll find a way to do that music in your life. You may have to do other things, but you will be driven by your passions. And then the other thing is, work hard. The great equalizer is people who persist and people who don't. People who just let it go and people who really stick with it. And also, I guess the final thing I would say is don't let others break your confidence. Keep yourself confident. You're all going to go to college. More colleges are going to want you than you want them. If you have one dream for one single place that's the perfect place for you, have a backup plan, because sometimes things don't work out that way and you put all your eggs in one basket and the basket goes kaput for lots of different reasons. Things happen in life, so you got to prepare, as I said at the beginning, I think, to take the kind of risks, to really see yourself in multiple environments. So follow your passion, take some risks and stick with things. Persistence, and understand that you have innate talent and skill and you can do all the things that you see all the people in my generation or your teachers doing. What is the great equalizer? People who stick with it and who really pursue that level of commitment to their interests. So really try to do that, and I hope you'll all come back to Washington. There's a lot of things in life that are ahead of you, and use other people. They will help you. And I say you have to step out to step up. And so stepping out is taking risks, and taking risks give you new opportunities to think about things that you want to do for yourself and for other people.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you all. Have a great day in Washington.